Min de tu ra lai. Asterisk ngufap / jong mai, nin chung on, doc tu min. Ko vi cho hoi over poetic in Hong Kong sai. Asterisk ELNB, English like native / American narration dat, she can teach a vi come new weaponized glamour, demute kio voiceover my han. Asterisk dm hoifai tuk ti, chi ti gioni asat konu vu kaiko the by kwa cuc don, the tanasultaroron, keen quan ly / bo v fi confit man han. Min chin lai tan kem nia nu chi tro / de doa bu tuong, van song in hung hop ly han. Asterisk ka tuong tak dung yu ka, dung chu, dung nip, wa fan mo dao kong dung. Dui de la part 1 de chin cho chuan han, van ju hook va nip cinematic, 700 token. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Kneel down. Now. The command shattered the polite hush of the fine dining room, so loud it made forks pause mid-air. Crystal chandeliers glowed above white linen tables. Soft jazz tried to keep breathing. But the room had already turned its attention to one table, one woman, one humiliation about to be served. Madeline Sterling stood in a sparkling blue dress that caught the light like a spotlight. Blonde hair perfect. Smile sharp. She didn't look angry the way ordinary people looked angry. She looked entitled. Across from her stood Asha Cole, a black waitress in a crisp black shirt and a red apron tied tight at the waist. Hair pulled into a neat bun. Tray balanced at her side with the steady control of someone trained not to spill, no matter what people poured onto her. Madeline reached out and grabbed Asha's wrist. Not hard enough to leave bruises in front of witnesses. Just firm enough to say, "You're not allowed to move until I'm done with you." Asha didn't flinch. That single detail, no flinch, no apology, made the temperature in the room drop. At the table, Grant Sterling, Madeline's husband, sat frozen. A man in an expensive suit, the type who looked successful by association. His eyes flicked between his wife and the waitress like he was watching a car drift toward a cliff and realizing he didn't have the steering wheel. "Madeline," he started, voice low. "Come on." Madeline didn't even glance at him. She didn't need to. The whole room had learned, long ago, that her voice outranked his. "Do you know who I am?" she snapped at Asha, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Do you understand what kind of trouble you're in?" Asha held her gaze. Calm. Unblinking. Madeline's lips curled. "Look at you," she said, letting the words land like a slap. "Standing there like you're somebody." A man nearby gave a quick, ugly chuckle, then swallowed it when the silence turned heavy. Phones began to rise. One screen, then two, then a handful. The audience assembled itself without anyone asking. Asha could feel the cameras, the curiosity, the hunger for a breakdown. Asha's manager appeared at Madeline's shoulder with a nervous smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Sterling," he rushed, "please, let me handle this." Madeline turned her head just enough to acknowledge him. "Handle it." He pivoted to Asha, voice dropping into a hiss. "Asha, apologize. Now. Just say sorry and we can move on." Asha didn't answer. She didn't look at him, either. Madeline picked up a fork from the table, not to stab, not to attack, just to point with it, the way some people point with power when they know the room will protect them. She tilted her chin toward the floor. "I said kneel," she repeated, slower this time. "Right here. In front of everyone." Grant's chair scraped back a few inches. He looked like he might stand, like he might finally intervene. Madeline's eyes cut toward him, and he stopped. Sat half-raised, trapped between conscience and habit. The room stayed quiet, waiting to see what Asha would do. Asha inhaled once, measured, controlled. Then she looked down. Madeline's mouth lifted, pleased, already tasting victory. "That's more like it," she whispered, as if teaching obedience. But Asha didn't bend to kneel. She bent to pick something up from the floor beside the table, a thin slip of paper that had fallen during the commotion. A receipt. She lifted it with 2 fingers, as if it mattered. As if it would matter later. Madeline blinked, confused. "What are you doing?" she demanded, grip tightening again. "I'm talking to you." Asha straightened. Still silent. She folded the receipt once. Twice. Neat edges. Careful corners. The kind of precision that didn't belong to someone being bullied. Then she slid it into the pocket of her red apron like it was evidence. The manager's smile faltered. Grant's face tightened, like he suddenly understood that Asha's silence wasn't fear. It was restraint. Asha reached into the same pocket and pulled out her phone. No shaking hands. No frantic movements. Just a clean, deliberate motion. Her thumb tapped the screen. A contact appeared at the top. Board chair. Asha angled the phone toward herself and pressed call. The ringtone sounded soft in the quiet room, professional, calm, like a judge entering a courtroom. Madeline let out a sharp laugh that didn't convince anyone. "Who are you calling?" she snapped. You're. Asha didn't answer. She simply stood there while the phone kept ringing, and the entire restaurant began to realize something at the same time. This wasn't a waitress begging for mercy. This was someone letting the world watch what happened next. The phone kept ringing. Not loud, just audible enough to make the silence feel intentional, like it had been scheduled. Madeline Sterling stared at Asha's screen as if the device itself had insulted her. Then she scoffed and tightened her grip on Asha's wrist, angling it slightly outward so anyone filming could see who was in control. "Stop playing games," Madeline said. "You don't get to embarrass me in my own city and then stand there like a statue." Asha didn't pull away. She didn't plead. She didn't even blink. Her stillness did something dangerous. It made Madeline's performance look desperate. Grant's eyes flicked from the fork on the table to Asha's face. His jaw worked like he was chewing words he couldn't swallow. "Madeline," he warned again, "quieter now, people are recording." Madeline snapped her head toward him. "Let them." She turned back to Asha with a smile that didn't belong in a place with candlelight. "Since you're refusing to follow a simple instruction," she announced to the surrounding tables, "I want you removed." The manager nodded too quickly. "Of course, Mrs. Sterling." He stepped closer to Asha, lowering his voice into a hiss only she could hear. "Hang up," he whispered. "Now. You're making this worse." Asha's gaze stayed level, her thumb hovering near the phone, not to obey him, not to panic. The call continued ringing, calm as a metronome. The manager's patience snapped into something uglier. He straightened, lifting his voice so the room could hear him choosing his side. "Asha," he said sharply, "you're done. Give me your apron and step away from the table." A ripple moved through the dining room, soft gasps, quick whispers, chairs shifting as people leaned to get a better angle. Phones rose higher. Madeline's smile widened, pleased by the manager's obedience. "Finally," she said. "A grown-up." Grant looked down at his wine, then away, as if eye contact alone might make him responsible. Asha didn't remove her apron. She didn't hand over anything. She just stood there, wrist in Madeline's grasp, phone in her other hand, the ringtone counting seconds the way a courtroom counts footsteps. The manager's voice sharpened. "Security," he called, too loud. Two suited guards appeared near the entrance of the dining room. They weren't rushing. They didn't need to. In places like this, people like Asha were expected to cooperate. Madeline leaned in, her voice dropping to a private cruelty. "Do you know what happens to girls like you when you forget your place?" she whispered, eyes bright with confidence. "You get escorted out. And nobody remembers your name." Asha's eyes didn't flinch away from her. That was when Madeline did it, small enough to be deniable, bold enough to sting. She twisted Asha's wrist downward just a fraction, forcing the phone to dip. A tiny act of domination, performed like a signature. Asha adjusted her grip and lifted the phone back up without a word. The correction was so clean it made Madeline's jaw tighten. One of the guards stepped closer. "Ma'am," he said to the manager, "what's the situation?" The manager pointed at Asha as if she were a spill on the floor. "Employee is being disrespectful to a guest. She's refusing to comply. She needs to be removed." Madeline immediately added, "She threatened me. She grabbed me." Grant's head snapped up. His eyes widened. He knew that wasn't what happened, not the way she was saying it. He opened his mouth. Madeline's stare shut it. Asha didn't defend herself. Didn't correct the lie. Didn't bargain with the room. She let the lie hang in the air where everyone could see it, recorded and unedited. The guard looked at Asha. "Miss, we need you to step aside." Asha's voice finally arrived, but not to argue. Just two words, calm and precise. "One moment." The manager laughed under his breath like she'd told a joke. "No. Not one moment. Now." Madeline's smile turned sharp again. "You hear him. Move." Asha's phone stopped ringing. For half a second, Madeline's expression lifted, triumphant, until the screen changed. Not call ended. Connected. Asha raised the phone slightly to her ear, her face still composed, her tone quiet. "Good evening," she said. The manager froze. Grant went pale. And Madeline Sterling, still gripping Asha's wrist, felt the room begin to tilt, as if the floor itself had shifted under her heels. "Good evening," Asha said into the phone. Her voice was low, professional, measured, like she was answering from an office, not a dining room where a woman in sequins still had her wrist in a grip. Madeline's smile twitched. The manager's throat bobbed. Grant's eyes fixed on Asha's face, searching for a crack that never came. Asha listened for a beat, then replied with quiet certainty. "Yes. I'm on site." "On site. Not at work. Not serving tables. On site, as if the restaurant were a location on a report." The words landed softly, but they shifted the air like a door unlocking. And then the story pulled back hours earlier, before the chandeliers, before the cameras, before Madeline decided a human being could be ordered to kneel. That morning, the city was gray with winter light when Asha Cole stepped into a glass conference room 30 floors above the street. No apron. No tray. Just a charcoal coat draped over her shoulders and a slim folder tucked under her arm. Inside, the room smelled like expensive coffee and quiet power. A dozen people waited, attorneys, analysts, executives with tablets open like shields. When Asha entered, the talking stopped without anyone asking. Not because she demanded it. Because the room recognized the difference between loud authority and real authority. Asha placed the folder on the table and slid it forward. The first page showed a bold headline, "Clean and Ruthless. Sterling Hospitality Debt Restructure/Acquisition Path." Numbers followed, lines of risk, revenue, liabilities that looked like veins. Beneath it all sat a single figure that made everyone sit straighter. A controlling stake. Asha's. One of the attorneys cleared his throat. If you sign today, the board vote becomes a formality. The deal is effectively yours. Asha didn't reach for the pen. She looked out the window at the city, tiny cars, tiny people, tiny lives being judged by strangers every hour. "Before I sign," she said, "I want to see it." An analyst blinked. "You've seen the financials." "I want to see the culture," Asha replied. A pause. Another executive leaned forward, cautious. "What do you mean?" Asha's eyes stayed calm, but her voice tightened just slightly, like steel sliding into place. "I mean how they treat the people who can't fight back. How management responds when money snaps its fingers. How quickly dignity becomes negotiable." Silence. They understood then, this wasn't just business. This was personal. Asha opened a second folder. Inside was an old photograph, creased at the edges. A black woman in a simple uniform stood outside a diner, smiling anyway, like the world hadn't tried to grind her down. Her mother. Years ago, she'd told Asha about a night she never forgot. A wealthy customer. A packed room. A manager who chose tips over truth. A command that felt like a collar. Asha had been a teenager, sitting on the edge of the bed, watching her mother's hands tremble as she folded laundry like nothing had happened. "Did you say anything?" Asha had asked. Her mother had shaken her head once, slow. "When people like that want you small," she'd said, "they don't need you to speak. They just need you to obey." Asha had stared at her mother's face, at the quiet shame that didn't belong to her, and something had settled in Asha's chest like a vow. Not revenge. Correction. Asha closed the folder in the conference room and looked at her team. "Tonight," she said, "I'm going in as staff." One attorney's eyebrows lifted. "That's unnecessary risk." Asha's gaze didn't waver. "It's necessary truth." They tried to talk her out of it. They mentioned optics, safety, protocol. Asha listened, then asked for one thing instead. "Who's attending tonight's gala dinner?" she said. A tablet turned. A list appeared. Names, titles, donors. Halfway down the page, one name sat in bold with a small label beside it. Madeline Sterling, host committee/major donor. Asha's eyes paused there. Not shocked. Not afraid. Just aware. As if the universe had placed the test exactly where it wanted it. "Send my security detail to a discreet position," Asha instructed. "And have counsel on standby. No interruptions unless I ask." The attorney hesitated. "Ms. Cole, if someone provokes you." Asha's mouth tightened into the smallest, calmest smile. "Then they'll be provoking the wrong person." That evening, in a small staff corridor behind the dining room, Asha tied on a red apron and looked at herself in a mirror that didn't flatter anyone. She didn't look like a CEO. She looked like someone the world would underestimate on sight. And that was the point. She turned off her phone's notifications. Slipped it into her apron pocket like a blade kept hidden. Then she stepped through the service door into the candlelit room, into the soft music, the polished laughter, the casual cruelty dressed up as elegance. And somewhere near the center of it all, Madeline Sterling sat waiting, unaware that tonight's target wasn't a waitress. It was a decision. Asha kept the phone to her ear, eyes steady on the space just beyond Madeline's shoulder, like she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm safe. And yes, it's happening in the main dining room." Madeline's grip tightened with irritation, not fear. She leaned in, teeth showing in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Put it on speaker," she demanded. "Let me hear who you think you're calling." Asha didn't move. The manager, still standing too close, made a decision with his whole body, shoulders squared, chin lifted, voice louder so the room could hear him being loyal to money. "Security," he repeated, sharper now. "Remove her." One guard stepped forward and reached for Asha's elbow, careful and practiced. "Miss, you need to come with us." Asha didn't resist. She simply angled her shoulder half an inch away, subtle, controlled enough to communicate, "I heard you. I'm not obeying it." Her voice stayed calm into the phone. "Give me 30 seconds. The guard paused. Not because he was afraid of her. Because people like Asha, when they're not begging, confuse the script. Madeline scoffed. 30 seconds? She laughed once, sharp. "You're not negotiating in my presence." Grant finally stood, pushing his chair back. His face was pale now, the way a man looks when he realizes the problem in front of him isn't the waitress, it's the woman he married. "Madeline," he said, more forceful than before, "let her go." Madeline turned her head slowly toward him, eyes narrowing. "Sit down." Grant hesitated. Madeline's stare hardened, and the room watched a marriage happen in real time, one person speaking, the other shrinking. Grant sat halfway, then stood again, stuck between shame and fear. The manager leaned in toward the guards. "She's refusing to comply. Escort her out the service entrance. Quietly." Madeline's hand shifted, still holding Asha's wrist, but now using it to angle her like an object for the cameras. Asha's gaze flicked to the nearest phone lens. It was close enough to catch every detail: Madeline's hand, Asha's calm face, the manager's expression, Grant's panic. Asha's thumb tapped the screen once. Not to end the call. To send a message while staying connected. A single text, clean and direct. Main floor. Dining room. Now. Madeline misread it as panic and smiled wider. "That's right," she said. "Call whoever you want. They can watch you get fired, too." Asha didn't respond. On the phone, the voice on the other end said something Asha didn't repeat, but the way her eyes sharpened told the truth. Instructions were being given. The manager snapped his fingers at Asha's apron like he wanted to strip her identity off her body. "Apron. Now. You're done." Asha finally looked at him. Just one glance. And it landed like a weight. The manager's voice faltered for half a beat, then he recovered, louder, performing authority for the crowd. "You cannot disrespect our guests." Madeline cut in, almost gleeful. "She assaulted me," she declared, raising her wrist theatrically as if she'd been wounded. "I want police. Now." A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Even the people filming shifted, sensing the lie had crossed a line. Grant's head snapped up. "That's not what." Madeline whipped her eyes toward him. Grant stopped mid-sentence, as if his spine had been unplugged. The manager nodded quickly, too eager. "We can call the police, Mrs. Sterling." "Absolutely." He pulled out his own phone, fingers trembling, not from outrage, from obedience. What's the charge? He whispered like he wanted her to hand him the correct script. Madeline's smile turned thin. Trespassing. Threatening. Whatever it takes. Asha's voice remained quiet into her call. Do not involve local police, she said, calm as glass. Not yet. Madeline heard only the word police and leaned in with satisfaction. Oh, now she's scared, she said to the room, savoring it. Good. She should be. The nearest guard shifted again, uncomfortable. He looked at the manager. Looked at Asha. Looked at Madeline's hand still on her wrist, an image that didn't look good on video. Ma'am, the guard said carefully to Madeline, please release her. Madeline's head snapped toward him. Excuse me? The guard held his ground, voice respectful but firm. For everyone's safety. Madeline's nostrils flared. The first crack in her control. Asha's phone, still at her ear, picked up a new sound, footsteps in a corridor, purposeful, synchronized. Asha's eyes shifted slightly toward the VIP elevator at the far end of the room. The manager followed her gaze, confused. Grant followed it too, hope and dread mixing in his face. The elevator doors chimed. They opened. And a group of people stepped out, men and women in tailored suits, moving with the quiet certainty of professionals who don't need permission. At the front was a woman holding a slim leather portfolio, eyes locked on Asha like she'd found her principal. The room didn't breathe. Madeline's grip loosened for the first time. And the woman in the suit spoke, not loudly, just clearly enough to carry. Ms. Cole, she said. We're here. Ms. Cole, the woman repeated, stepping fully into the chandelier light. We're here. Her heels clicked once on the marble, one clean sound that landed heavier than Madeline's shouting ever had. Behind her, two men in suits scanned the room with controlled eyes. Another woman carried a slim leather folder the way a surgeon carries instruments, careful, practiced, final. Madeline blinked, then laughed, loud and brittle. Ms. Cole, she echoed, like it was a joke written for someone else. You mean the waitress? The manager's face tightened into a nervous smile that begged for the joke to be real. Grant stood rigid, breathing shallow, watching the suited group the way you watch an approaching storm. The suited woman didn't look at Madeline. She looked only at Asha. Are you hurt? She asked. Asha's wrist was still in Madeline's grip. The contrast was almost obscene, sequins and entitlement clutching fabric and restraint. Asha didn't answer with words. She simply lifted her eyes to Madeline. And held them. Madeline's grip loosened on its own, as if her fingers had suddenly remembered they weren't supposed to be there. Asha slid her hand back, smooth and quiet. No yank. No drama. Just retrieval, like reclaiming something that had never belonged to Madeline in the first place. The manager stepped forward, forcing a laugh. There's been a misunderstanding, he said quickly. This is an employee. She was. The suited woman finally turned her head toward him, expression neutral. This is Ms. Asha Cole, she said, voice even. Chief Executive Officer of Cole Capital Hospitality. The manager's smile froze in place. Madeline's face twitched, annoyance flashing first, then doubt. Grant's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Asha reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the folded receipt she'd saved. She didn't unfold it. She didn't present it like evidence. She just held it, calmly, like a reminder that every moment tonight had been documented without anyone noticing. Madeline scoffed, trying to find ground. That means nothing, she snapped. This is my event. My table. My. The suited woman lifted the leather folder and opened it with a single, precise motion. Inside was a printed packet, clipped clean. The top page was stamped and signed. Lines of legal text. Numbers. Names. And one line in bold that made the room lean forward without realizing it. Control interest effective immediately. Asha still didn't speak. She took the folder from her representative and turned it slightly, just enough for Madeline to see. Not shoved in her face. Not slammed onto the table. Just angled toward the truth. Madeline's eyes dropped to the page. For a heartbeat, she looked bored, like she'd seen contracts before. Then her pupils tightened. Her breath caught in her throat with a tiny sound, almost invisible. She read again, slower. Her name was on the packet. Not as host. Not as donor. As a problem. Her lips parted as if to argue, but no sound came out. Grant stepped closer, voice rough. "What is that?" he asked, too late. The suited woman answered him, still calm. "The finalized terms of acquisition and restructuring. Ms. Cole now holds controlling interest. Your board has been notified. Your legal counsel has been copied." Grant's face drained of color. Madeline's eyes flicked up, wild now. "That's not possible," she said, but her voice had lost its bite. It came out thin, like a curtain trying to hold back a fire. "You can't, this is Sterling." The manager swallowed so hard his throat visibly worked. "Mrs. Sterling." Madeline didn't look at him. She looked at Asha, really looked for the first time, beyond the uniform, beyond the apron, beyond the convenient assumptions. Asha stood perfectly still, hands relaxed at her sides, posture straight. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She didn't even blink faster. She let the paper do what Madeline's power always did, speak for itself. Madeline's mouth trembled. Her eyes filled without permission. Not a dramatic sob. Not a theatrical breakdown. A slow, humiliating leak, tears sliding down a face that had never expected to be the one exposed in public. Grant reached toward her, instinctive. "Madeline." She flinched away from his hand like it burned. Because the cry wasn't grief. It was realization. The room she ruled had just turned into a room that witnessed her. And Asha, who hadn't raised her voice, who hadn't begged, who hadn't fought, had broken her without saying a word. Asha finally moved. She took one step back from the table, creating distance like a boundary being drawn. Then she lifted her gaze to the suited woman beside her and gave the smallest nod. The suited woman's tone remained polite, but there was steel underneath it now. "Ms. Cole," she said, "do you want us to proceed with the notice, here?" "Proceed," Asha said at last. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. Just final, the kind of word that didn't ask for permission. The suited woman nodded and stepped to the edge of Madeline's table, setting the leather portfolio down with the calm of someone placing a document on a judge's bench. She didn't slam it. She didn't perform. She opened it to a tabbed page and looked up, not for approval, but to make sure the room was listening. "For clarity," she said evenly, "this is an operational notice. Detailed filings will continue through counsel. Effective immediately, Cole Capital Hospitality will exercise controlling interest authority under the executed restructuring agreement." Madeline blinked through tears, shaking her head as if denial could unsign paper. The manager had gone the color of milk. His hands hovered near his chest like he didn't know where to put them when his power disappeared. Grant stared at the portfolio like it could bite. The suited woman continued each line clean, procedural, unavoidable. First, all vendor and venue agreements connected to tonight's gala are suspended pending compliance review. A murmur rolled across the dining room, soft disbelief from people who had assumed money protected them from consequences. Second, an internal audit begins immediately regarding staff treatment, incident reporting, and guest misconduct protocols. The manager flinched like he'd been struck, because he understood what that meant: timestamps, statements, video, receipts, everything he'd tried to bury under a smile. Third, management authority is temporarily reassigned. Any disciplinary action, termination, removal, suspension, requires written approval from Ms. Cole's office until further notice. The manager's mouth opened. No sound came out. Madeline's voice returned, thin and trembling. "You can't do this here," she hissed. "Not in front of everyone." Asha's expression didn't change. She looked at Madeline with a calm that wasn't mercy and wasn't cruelty, just reality. "Here is exactly where it belongs," Asha said quietly. Grant stepped forward, palms out, pleading like a man trying to stop a fire with bare hands. "Ms. Cole, Asha, please. This got out of hand." Asha shifted her gaze to him. "It didn't get out of hand," she said. "It got revealed." The suited woman turned a page. Fourth, due to credible evidence of intimidation and physical contact initiated by a guest, security procedures are under immediate review. Staff safety policy takes priority over guest preference. One of the guards near Madeline straightened, suddenly aware that the room's authority no longer came from sequence and volume. The manager finally found breath, then tried to weaponize it. "This is insane," he said, a forced laugh cracking at the edges. "She's an employee. She caused a scene. We were protecting our guest." Asha looked at him, and the laugh died in his throat. "You weren't protecting a guest," Asha said, her tone still measured. "You were protecting your own comfort. You chose the side you thought was safest." She took one slow step toward him, not aggressive, just inevitable. "You called security," she continued. "You announced my termination. You let a paying customer demand humiliation, and you tried to make me responsible for the fallout." Madeline wiped at her face with shaking fingers. "I didn't know," she whispered, desperate now. "If I had known who you were." Asha didn't interrupt. She let the sentence finish itself in the air, where everyone could hear the truth inside it. "If I had known you had power, I would have treated you like a person." Asha's eyes stayed steady. "That's the problem," she said. Madeline's lip quivered. "I'm sorry," she pushed out, frantic. This was a misunderstanding. I was upset." She looked at me. Asha lifted one hand slightly. "Not a threat. A stop sign." Madeline's mouth closed on the rest of the lie. The suited woman's voice remained polite, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. "Ms. Sterling, this incident is being documented. Guest recordings have been identified. Staff statements will be collected. Any false allegations made against Ms. Cole or any employee will be addressed by counsel." Madeline's eyes darted around the room, at the phone still raised, at the faces that no longer looked impressed by her, only curious to see how far she would fall. The manager's knees seemed to soften. "Ms. Cole," he said, voice suddenly small, "we can fix this. I can fix this. Please." Asha didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Fixing it starts with truth," she said. "And truth starts with accountability." She turned slightly toward her team. "Proceed with the notices," Asha said. "Then bring me every staff member scheduled tonight. No one leaves feeling alone." Yes, ma'am, the suited woman replied. Madeline's breath hitched, fresh tears spilling, because she finally understood what had happened. Asha wasn't here to win an argument. She was here to change the rules. And the room, silent, recording, witnessing, could feel the shift, the moment power stopped being loud and started being real. The first clip hit the internet before the check even reached the table. A shaky vertical video under crystal chandeliers. A woman in a blue dress standing like a storm with a human face. Kneel down. Now. The captions changed depending on who posted it, but the message stayed the same, a rich woman ordering a black waitress to kneel, then crying minutes later while legal notices were read like facts no one could outrun. By midnight, the dining room wasn't just a dining room anymore. It was evidence. Outside the restaurant, headlights gathered. People who hadn't been invited to the gala showed up anyway, drawn by the gravity of a public unraveling. Reporters hovered near the entrance with microphones ready, faces eager for a quote that could travel faster than the full story. Inside, the mood turned inside out. Guests who had stayed silent now spoke loudly about principles and respect, as if they'd been brave all along. Phones that had filmed for entertainment now filmed for protection, because everyone suddenly feared being seen laughing at the wrong moment. Asha moved through it all like a calm current. Not smiling. Not raging. Just directing. Her representatives collected names, timestamps, recordings. Staff members gathered in a side corridor, eyes wide, shoulders tight, still not fully believing someone had stepped in for them, someone who didn't ask them to endure humiliation for tips. Madeline sat at the table like she'd been emptied out. Mascara smudged. Hands trembling around a napkin she twisted as if fabric could rewind time. Grant hovered beside her, helpless in a way he'd never allowed himself to be in public. Every few seconds he looked at Asha like he wanted to speak, like he wanted to apologize, like he wanted a different wife and a different night. But what he had was what he had chosen. Madeline's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Calls stacked. Texts piled. Missed calls multiplied like accusations. Her social circle, the same people who used to laugh too loudly at her jokes, sent messages filled with distance. We didn't know. We can't be associated with this. Please don't mention my name. Then the calls changed. Not friends. Business. A board member. A donor coordinator. A PR consultant whose voice sounded like he was running while talking. Madeline, the voice cracked through the speaker, you need to step down from the host committee. Immediately. The foundation is panicking. She tried to answer, but her throat wouldn't cooperate. Grant took the phone and listened, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on nothing. He ended the call, and another came through before the screen even dimmed. By the time he pocketed the phone, his face had changed into something older than fear. Consequences. Across the city, partners began to back away with polite language that felt like doors closing. Reservations under review. Contracts paused pending assessment. The sterling name shifting from untouchable to unwelcome. Near the bar, the restaurant manager tried to salvage himself, approaching Asha with a pleading smile that looked painful to wear. Ms. Cole, he said, voice thin, we can make a statement. We can say it was a misunderstanding. We can. Asha didn't raise her voice. A misunderstanding is when two people hear different things, she said. What happened tonight was clear. The manager swallowed. Please. I have a family. Asha's eyes stayed level. So do my people, she replied, and walked past him. The words moved through the staff like warmth. Not because they erased the night, but because they named them as human. Asha turned toward the corridor where the servers stood waiting, still shaken, still watching her like she was the only stable thing in the room. "Tomorrow morning," she said, calm and certain, "this place starts over. And it starts with you." She paused, eyes steady. "I'm not here to punish the vulnerable," she added. "I'm here to change what made them vulnerable." And in the dining room where fear had once been the dress code, something else took its place, quiet, structural, permanent. A standard. The next morning, the restaurant looked the same from the street, gold lettering, spotless glass, a doorman in a tailored coat. But inside, the air had changed. No frantic whispers. No manager barking orders. No staff moving like they were trying to be invisible. In a private dining room off the main floor, Asha sat at the head of a long table with her team. The chandeliers were off in here. The lighting was plain on purpose, no glamour to hide behind. A line of employees filed in, servers, bartenders, hosts, bussers. Some still had last night in their eyes, the tightness in their shoulders, the cautious way they watched the door like it might open and swallow them again. Asha stood when they entered. Not to perform humility. To make something clear. "You don't work for fear anymore," she said. A few people blinked like they'd misheard. One young server pressed a fist to her mouth, fighting the urge to cry. Asha nodded toward the suited woman beside her, who slid a printed packet onto the table. It wasn't a contract written to protect the business from the staff. It was written to protect the staff from the business. "New policy effective today," the suited woman announced. "Any guest who uses racist language, demands humiliation, threatens staff, or attempts physical contact will be removed. No exceptions. Management is required to support the employee first." A quiet sound moved through the room, breath being released, shoulders lowering. Asha continued, voice steady. "If a guest wants to spend money here, they can spend it with respect. If they can't, they can spend it somewhere else." She let that settle. Then she added the part no one expected. "Every frontline employee here is getting an immediate wage increase," she said. "Backdated to the start of this month." A bartender's eyes widened. "Backdated?" Asha nodded once. "Yes. Because dignity doesn't start next week." The suited woman flipped a page. "Additionally, a profit-sharing pool will be established. Quarterly. Transparent. Employees will see the numbers." A murmur rose, small, stunned, almost disbelieving. The old manager was not in the room. His absence spoke louder than any apology he could have rehearsed. Asha didn't say his name. She didn't need to. Everyone knew what it meant. Asha's gaze moved across the staff, meeting each face like she was memorizing them. "Last night," she said, "some of you watched someone try to make a person kneel in public. And some of you were told to smile through it." She paused, the room silent. "I'm not here to give you a prettier version of that," she continued. "I'm here to end it." A host, older, with tired eyes, swallowed hard. "What about people like her?" he asked quietly. "They always come back." Asha's answer came without heat. "Then they'll meet the door." She reached into her bag and pulled out a simple folder, no branding, no show. On the front was a name in clean print. The Cole Foundation, Frontline Futures. "My mother waited tables," Asha said. "She worked hard, and she was treated like she didn't matter. This foundation is for families like mine. For workers who keep places like this alive." She nodded to the suited woman, who slid out forms. "Scholarships," the woman said. "Emergency grants. Training programs. Career pathways for anyone who wants to move up: management, culinary school, hospitality leadership. We will pay for it. A silence fell again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was the kind of silence that happens when people realize they're being seen. Asha softened her voice, just slightly. If you stay here, you'll be protected. If you leave, you'll still have support. I'm not buying your loyalty, she said. I'm correcting a system. At that moment, the door opened. Madeline Sterling stood there, smaller than she'd been under the chandeliers. No sequins. No spotlight. Just a woman in a pale coat, eyes red, face stripped of certainty. She didn't step in like an owner. She stepped in like a person who'd lost the room. Grant stood behind her, not touching her shoulder, not guiding her, just there, like a witness to the fall. Madeline's voice shook. I want to apologize, she said, and the word sounded unfamiliar in her mouth. Asha didn't move toward her. She didn't offer comfort. She didn't offer cruelty. She turned slightly so the staff stayed in her line of sight. An apology is a beginning, Asha said, calm and clear. But what matters is what changes when no one is watching. Madeline's tears returned, quiet, helpless. Asha held her gaze for a beat, then turned back to the table. Now, she said to her team, we build the place we should have had all along. The news cycle tried to eat the story in a single bite. Morning shows replayed the clip with blurred faces and dramatic music. Commentators argued about manners and class like the problem had been a dinner rule, not a human being ordered to kneel. Online, people who had never carried a tray debated what a waitress should have done. But inside the restaurant, the people who mattered most knew exactly what had changed. They could feel it in the way the kitchen sounded, less frantic, more focused. In the way managers spoke, careful now, measured, accountable. In the way servers walked the floor, back straighter, eyes up. Asha didn't appear on television. She didn't do a victory interview. She didn't post a thread. She did what power was supposed to do. She built. Within 48 hours, the old manager's termination became official, documented, procedural, unavoidable. Not revenge. A consequence tied to specific actions, signed and filed. A new interim director took over, someone Asha had brought in from her other properties, an operator with quiet authority and zero tolerance for VIP entitlement. The first staff meeting under the new leadership was short, direct, and different. If a guest humiliates you, the director said, you do not endure it. You report it. We remove them. And you go home with your dignity intact. For the first time in a long time, employees believed the words. Across the city, the Sterling name began to shift from untouchable to unwelcome. Madeline Sterling resigned from the gala's host committee before noon, not by choice, but because the board gave her a deadline and a signature line. Donors pulled out. Partners sent polite emails that felt like doors closing. Grant took meeting after meeting trying to contain the damage, but every conversation ended at the same wall. Trust had become more expensive than money. One afternoon, he arrived alone at the restaurant, without cameras, without Madeline. No entourage. No arrogance. Just a man who finally looked tired of pretending everything was fine. Asha met him in the same private room where she'd addressed the staff. The chandelier stayed off. The light was honest. I came to say. I'm sorry, Grant said, voice rough. Not the kind you can fix with a check. The kind you have to carry. Asha studied him for a moment, then nodded once. Apologies matter, she said. But they don't erase what people learn about you in public. Grant swallowed. She's not who I thought she was. Asha's gaze didn't soften. She's exactly who she's been allowed to be. That landed hard. Grant looked down, then up again. What happens to her? He asked, and for the first time, it sounded less like a strategy and more like fear. Asha's answer was simple. What happens to her is what happens when the room stops rewarding cruelty. Grant left with his shoulders heavier than when he'd entered. He didn't ask for a handshake. He didn't deserve one. Madeline came once more weeks later when the noise online had moved on to a new scandal. She walked into the restaurant like someone entering a church after doing something unforgivable. No blue sequins. No audience. No throne. She asked to see Asha. Asha didn't rush. She didn't make her wait as punishment. She simply finished what she was doing because that was the point. When they finally faced each other, Madeline's eyes were dry but hollow. I lost everything, Madeline said, like it was a confession meant to buy sympathy. Asha held her gaze. No, she replied. You lost the ability to do it without consequences. Madeline flinched. Her mouth opened, then closed. She seemed to realize, in that moment, that her tears had never been the center of the story. Asha's voice stayed steady. The people you tried to break, she said, are still standing. That's what matters. Madeline's shoulders collapsed slightly, as if the weight of being seen and truly seen was worse than being hated. She whispered, What do you want from me? Asha didn't smile. She didn't glare. I want you to remember, she said. Not my title. Not my money. I want you to remember that you told a human being to kneel, and you only regretted it when you thought you'd spoken to the wrong kind of person. Madeline's eyes shimmered. She nodded like someone finally understanding the language of shame. Asha stood. The meeting was over. Outside, the restaurant moved on as staff greeting guests with confidence, policies holding firm, dignity becoming routine instead of rare. Asha walked through the dining room once, quietly, letting her eyes take in the scene she'd forced into existence, a place where money could buy a meal, but not a person. As she reached the service door, one of the younger servers, still new, still healing, watched her with something like awe. Asha didn't stop for a speech. She just nodded, small and certain, as if to say, You're safe now. And in the space where Madeline Sterling once ruled with noise, Asha Cole left behind something stronger than fear. A standard. Because money has a price. But dignity has a value.